The suffering of generations must be endured to achieve our divine end. That is from the reveal trailer for Naughty Dog's next game. It's called Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet, and they printed this on a commemorative coin that they gave to their staff for 2025. And do you know what's really funny about this? It's not just a game thing, it's pretty much actually true, because functionally, that is the work ethic of Naughty Dog's leadership. And what we're going to dive into today is all of the reporting around just how much of a disaster it seems their internal game development has been. You see, they just put their staff through nearly 2 months of big crunch, all to deliver an internal demo. And the thing is, the full game isn't even planned to release for years, which just makes us think, hang on a second. Are you basically going to be crunching for years upon years to make any of this happen? You see, for years we've heard hell stories about Naughty Dog, basically them just throwing bodies at the problem and burning through their staff. Well, doesn't seem like much has changed. In March 2020, The Last of Us Part 2 was getting ready for release after loads and loads of delays. Back at the time, Jason Schreier was working for Kotaku and he dropped this bombshell report. And I really do mean bombshell. In it, we learned that Naughty Dog was crunching, and crunching hard. Staff were describing 12-hour days and weekend work, pretty much going on and on and on for a long-ass time, the sort of thing that we in the industry would call a death march. And it was all in service of getting the game ready at absolutely any cost. But to make things even worse, Jason's report wasn't just about The Last of Us Part 2. It actually revealed that this crunch stuff was going on as far back as 2016's Uncharted 4. Now, that's a game that Neil Druckmann, the co-director, kind of darkly described as a reflection on the drive that leads many people in game development to crunch, which is of course rather easy to say when, you're kind of the boss. Now, to make this sort of thing relevant to like you and me, I just have it in my head. What's been going on with Naughty Dog? Why has their output kind of decreased over time? Why has a lot of it been like remakes, remasters, that kind of thing? And I have to wonder if they've just lost a lot of their staff because they've ended up being a bit of a shit place to work. Now, at least after that report went out, it seemed leadership kind of understood the problem. They said that they wanted to improve things after 2020, basically between the shift to remote work and the abuse that staff suffered during the launch window leaks. And by 2022, sources actually told Jason Schreier that a freshly implemented production team had actually improved things for the company. For a bit of a quote on that, well, in 2024, the QA lead Patrick Gross explained in a documentary how things had changed. Though obviously, given the existence of this video, I'm not too sure how it went. Here's what he said. When we onboard people, we tell them we have a reputation as a studio for crunching, and it's something that we don't want, and it's something we're not going to do anymore. I hate to shock you, but the reports are that they are in fact doing it again. And in this case, it is down to pressure. And that's because by the end of 2025, Naughty Dog were under severe pressure. Look, if you don't want to code or you're not into games, skip this, but if not, then I have got something for you, and that is boot.dev/BellylerNews. They're today's sponsor, and you know what? Where the fuck were they a decade ago when I was in university? You see, I've got a BEng computer science, and from doing that, I can tell you that Boot teaches this stuff incalculably better. Now, what they teach you is back-end development. That's the kind that lands 100k plus comp jobs, and they do it through a proper 12-month structured program that's like a role-playing game. I mean, literally, leaderboards, achievements, a Discord that actually helps, and over 750,000 students have completed 33.7 million lessons, which is wild, and that's including TypeScript, Go, and Python from the fundamentals up. So this is not some learn to code in 2 weeks silly scam thing. Boot teaches you the fundamentals that separate professional developers from vibe coders who ship security nightmares. And just take a look at their new training grounds feature. It's kind of wild. It knows what you've learned on their platform, and then it uses that to challenge you, basically generating personalized coding problems using spaced repetition so you actually learn. It's always growing, it's an actual community, and you can actually browse all of their contents for completely free. You only pay when you want to get stuck into all the interactivity and game-related stuff. To learn it all properly and get 25% off your first purchase, go to boot.dev/BellylerNews. The way to save the most money is to do that on the annual plan, and of course that's backed up by the fact that if you're not happy, they will refund you on the spot. What we're talking about today then is 7 weeks of mandatory and seemingly unpaid overtime for Naughty Dog staff that ended just before Christmas. So the team found themselves crunching again, even though we had all of this PR-ish stuff saying that, oh no, we don't do that sort of thing anymore. Now, this is an allegation that's coming from Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, and in his report, he cites people working on Intergalactic. And as for what was demanded of them, well, it was at a minimum 8 hours of extra log development time per week, all in office, and that this was overriding their previous 3-day-per-week policy. That's 3 days of having to work physically in the office. Now, obviously, if you're working 8 hours more a week and you're not being paid for those 8 hours, I think something's going fairly wrong. Now, what's on surface level weird, but I think is not surprising, is that in theory, leadership had actually placed guardrails on this sort of thing, trying to prevent it from happening. But in practice, well, they were telling staff they shouldn't work for more than 60 hours total each week. Obviously, that's quite a lot. So basically, staff had to end up threading a needle here. They had to meet management's demands without making management look bad on the actual official logs. You know, do a whole bunch of crunch, but make sure that your actual logs cover your boss's ass. Seems sketchy. Now, we currently understand that the crunch period has actually ended and that they successfully completed the demo before Christmas, meaning they can return to basically normal work, including doing 3 days in the office as of January. But given that this sort of thing happened, for an internal demo, so not the sort of thing you should need to crunch out, people are kind of worrying, and by worrying, well, I have a quote. They are wondering if overtime requirements will get worse later in the development cycle. Do you really have to wonder? I think we all know that's going to happen. I mean, if the past is even a slight indicator with this company, it's absolutely going to happen. Because, you see, this stuff was not about the release of the game. That's not what they were crunching for. The game isn't even expected until mid-2027. Let's place bets on whether that'll happen or not. It's not currently some Last of Us Part 2 scenario. What this was all about was crunching a demo because of the internal pressure that Naughty Dog have been facing. And this is where I have another quote from Jason's report. This overtime period was an attempt to get the production back on track after several missed deadlines. And if you've been keeping up with what's going on at Sony, you'll know that there's probably quite a threat looming over the studio. This crunch was about shipping a demo for PlayStation. Now, milestone reviews are perfectly standard, and in non-first-party games, they're usually how you unlock your next stage of funding. So, you hit a milestone, you get your money. And this basically allows for feedback, course correction, and it lets publishers protect their money if development is completely going wrong. But if several missed deadlines, which is a direct quote from Jason's reporting, have already passed, then that does suggest something has gone deeply wrong at Naughty Dog, and has gone wrong at the worst possible time. And that's because right now, PlayStation are out for blood and efficiency. You see, in their 2024 business segment reports, Herman Hulst explained that they had, and I'll now go to a quote from the man himself, changed the way we support studios through central services, greater operational rigor, which, by the way, if you're at one of those studios, is what we call a veiled threat, but also, probably wise. But to go back to Herman, a much more intentional top-down approach to portfolio, increased oversight of our development processes, and he goes on and stuff, but you can basically understand that it's all in service of reducing costs, keeping their budgets on track, and, quote, balancing profit potential with associated risks. Not having another Concord, basically. This is why 2 unannounced live service games at Bluepoint and Bend were cancelled in early 2025. Now, the timing here is actually real important. Early 2025 is before Concord goes and lights itself on fire and dies. So even before Concord imploded, PlayStation had already decided they were trying to get their risk in order. And by that time, we'd already had plenty of evidence. They'd laid off 8% of their employees globally, and they closed down London studios in early 2024. That's all stuff that can't be blamed on Concord, and those layoffs also did impact Naughty Dog. All of that feeds into this story. I mean, if Naughty Dog aren't immune to layoffs, which we already know they're not, and they've missed several deadlines, which reports say that they have, well, would they be immune to having a game cancelled? Now, PlayStation have shown that, say with Marathon, they're willing to throw money at a project if they really have to, but a game like Intergalactic, well, that's over a year away. And if Naughty Dog had already missed several milestones, maybe this increased scrutiny could have pushed them back to their old habits, back to the crunch. Crunch that arguably gutted a lot of that studio's power, maybe even leading them to the stage where they're struggling to hit their targets. And of course, all of this is especially the case because the studio's leadership has actually been changing. And I think it all basically means big alarm bells are ringing. Since 2023, Neil Druckmann has been studio head and head of creative at Naughty Dog, leading a revamped team right as Intergalactic production was kicking off. But he actually wasn't working on Intergalactic full-time. His attention had been split between developing The Last of Us TV show, which of course is something the PlayStation have been very happy to support given, game sales, awards, and remember, those game sales aren't for super old versions of the game. No, they're for the brand new remasters that are still selling for quite a lot of money. So that was going on. But then in September, he actually announced he was returning to Naughty Dog before the filming of season 3 of the TV show. Basically, he said he'd been removed from day-to-day work and that other leaders had stepped up while he was focusing on the show. We then see, a month later, the Naughty Dog would begin crunching their staff to hit the demo deadline. Now obviously, I cannot tell you that there is a direct causal link between the return of Druckmann and the crunch that followed. I can't say that Neil just walked back into the office and said, "I'm getting the whip out, boys! Get working, because Herman's going to kill us all." I don't know if that happened or if it didn't happen. So read this as events that are happening in and around the same time, but are not necessarily causal. But what we can do is we can look at all the pressure that is building on Naughty Dog. We do see a PlayStation that is increasingly ruthless about cutting projects that don't come together. We have a studio head who has returned after the studio had missed multiple deadlines, and a weakened mid-level management that apparently hasn't been able to deliver a project without hurting its staff. All of that combined into nearly 2 months of crunch. And that is because crunch, in a way, is actually the easy way out. I can predict that the video comments are going to be full of people saying, "Oh my god, these entitled goddamn game developers with basically fake jobs sitting at computers. What a bunch of whiny crybabies. How about they go outside and do a real man's job?" That'll be there in the comments. And look, I know what it's like, say, crunching to get a conservatory done in time. You gotta dig the foundations in time for the concrete that's arriving or something, and yeah, you can't wait. The job has to be done. That's basically, my family business. I know what's up there. But a video game is not the same as building a conservatory. And I know that a lot of construction projects are a hell of a lot more complicated, but basically, stay with me here. Software is extremely complex, and while crunch will actually get you, it will actually work. You see, that's the thing. Crunch will work in a limited and specific fashion. You'll accrue a lot of technical debt. You will wear out your team. Because in a world where there's a bit of crunch here and there because, hey, it's the real world, shit goes wrong, I think that's basically okay and completely understandable. But when crunch just becomes the default way to sort things out, well, maybe that's how you end up with a studio like Naughty Dog, one that now is not able to hit its basic deadlines and has not been able to hit multiple of them in a row, basically meaning that Druckmann has maybe been forced to come back, right? And it's weird because the studio have been talking about fixing the crunch practices for years. They know it's bad. They know it's literally hurting the strength of their team and therefore hurting the amount of video game that they can produce for you. And every time, the people involved probably do mean it when they say they really don't want crunch. They can see they're exhausting their staff. They know that it's contributing to attrition. And from what we understand, attrition is fairly high at this studio, even though it's a studio that quite literally makes industry-defining games. But the thing is, crunch does actually ship games, and it has been shipping games for 20 years, 30 years. We have lots of different terms for it. BioWare Magic is one of them, and more than that, it ships games that top the charts and win critical acclaim. So yeah, they may make some changes and try to plan ahead better, but seemingly they still do miss the deadlines. They find their build isn't ready for review. It happens again. It happens again. Something's gone wrong in the process. Now they see Sony are cutting staff all over the place. They're killing projects. And maybe Naughty Dog starts to actually get scared because something's gone wrong in planning, and that does not change the fact that they need to ship their work. They can't go back in time to fix the plan, but what they can do is ask more of their staff. That's the easy thing to do, because for a studio like them, it has basically worked every time before. And maybe this early crunch means that staff will avoid crunch whenever release approaches. But it's almost always the case that crunching and crunching and crunching means technical debt, and burnt out staff. All things that reduce the efficiency of your team, the efficiency of your development, which probably means that, if I were you, I certainly wouldn't put money on Intergalactic actually coming out when it's supposed to come out. But hey, they can always rest easy in the knowledge that the crunch did pay off, that they did win. They completed their demo, but more than that, they actually won an award. It's the inaugural Workers' Choice Award for Worst Crunch Culture at the CWA union-hosted Avarice Awards. I wonder what sort of staff reports they got. It'd be pretty cool if some of those staff reports made it into my email inbox. I'd love to hear. But anyway, that is it for this video. Now you guys know what's up. Let me know what your bets are on when Intergalactic will come out, or if it will even come out. And to the award-winning management team at Naughty Dog, congratulations. It's great to see you guys get yet another win. I hope it was worth it. But speaking of worth it, lots of your effort has actually been worth it, because a lot of legal stuff is changing with gaming, and in a way that you will feel. And if you want to know all of what's going on there, check out this video next.